everyone. Welcome to Educon 2025. I'm Amelie. I'm a junior here at SLA. And I want to thank you all for coming out here tonight. And it's super awesome that we get to do this for all of you. And thanks for coming to support. And thank you to my senior co-chair, Ozzy, for showing me the ropes. Thank you to Ms. Shaft and Mr. Lehman for organizing this and continuing on the tradition. And now I want to leave it up to one of our panelists and our
principal is what you're looking for.
Okay. Our principal, Mr. Chris Lehman.
That could have hurt very quickly.
Hello everyone, welcome. We're thrilled to be hosting the 17th Educon, which is kind of incredible. Yeah. So tonight we have an incredible panel. I am so excited about this panel that for the first time ever I'm moderating it, because I was like, I want to ask the questions. So with that, I'm going to introduce them, to ask them to come up. I'm not going to read their bios. I'm going to ask them when they come up to say a little bit about themselves and why they're so interested in this idea of community, especially in the moment in which we live. So first up, Dr. Roderick Carey, if you would join us. So that one's yours.
Sorry, cool, thank you.
And I think, yeah. Yeah, can you give us a quick 30-second and then we'll bring up the next panelist. There, that's how you turn it on.
Hello, can you hear me? Good.
Yes.
Hello, friends. I'm Rod Carey. I'm an associate professor at the University of Delaware. I'm a teacher, I'm a researcher, I'm a father, I'm an artist. And it's just such an honor to be here. I've heard so much about this marvelous place, and it's so great to finally be here. I focus on my research on two areas. How do we create schools that help kids imagine their future selves after high school? And then how can we create schools that help kids feel like they matter? What does it mean to feel significant, worthy, valued, appreciated, missed when you're not here at school? So it's an honor to be here. I'm sure more of my bio and my life will come out as we ask questions, so I'll stop talking there.
All right, next up is Dr. Vivian Gadsden. There you go.
Okay. Good evening. It's great to see all of you. I do this least well talking about who I am, but I'm Vivian Gadsden. I'm a professor in the Graduate School of Education at Penn. Says Kelly. I look at learning and literacies across the life course from early childhood through the aging process, but my work has primarily focused in the past 10 years on ensuring the well-being of young children and families within the various communities that they live. And that work is particularly focused on issues of equity, access, for all children and families, but particularly for those in historically marginalized communities. And this is an important panel for any number of reasons that ask us to consider the ways in which communities have historically been marginalized as we think about research, but a beautiful and burgeoning body of work that focuses on communities in our field. So it's very exciting to be here. And our son went to high school here. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Next up, from Drexel University, Dr. Youngmoo Kim.
Good evening. It's great to be back at Educon.
Woo!
It's been a couple of years. I'm Youngmoo Kim. I'm the Vice Provost for University and Community Partnerships at Drexel University. I've also been on the faculty there for 20 years. Gosh, a long time. Time flies. But my office, University and Community Partnerships, oversees our university's commitment to civic engagement, right? And we still aspire to be the most engaged university in the country. And that means that really flipping a lot of things around, that universities are often seen as distant institutions, not very connected with local communities, neighborhoods, not doing a whole lot in partnership or with neighbors. And we've tried to flip that around. And I can tell you more about that, but it's great to be back here. Thank you, Chris, for the invitation.
Absolutely. And last but definitely not least, Dr. Linda Nathan.
Thank you all. I come hawking a free book, but I'm going to sell it for $40. So what I think about after spending 40 years in the Boston Public Schools and having the opportunity to start not just one, but 3 different democratic schools, is how do we build democratic schools? So this panel, where we're talking about community, to me is code for democratic schools, little d. That's what I teach at Harvard, that's what I think about, and I'm proud to say that the schools that I founded, all but one are still going strong in Boston and are little d democratic schools. So I'll draw on those experiences during the panel. It's great to be back.
Oh, wait, see. Oh, wait, So, as we wait, as we get settled in and sit down, this idea of how we create community obviously is something that SLA has been sort of consumed with for a very long time. And when we were looking at this year's theme for Educon, right now, in the moment in which we live, that seemed even more important as we seem perhaps fractured more than we used to be in any number of ways. So with that, I'm going to start off by sort of grounding us in sort of a timeless question. And I just open it up to the panel, which is, what are the essential elements of a school community that actually transcend time and circumstances? What are the things that are necessary always when we think about school communities?
Can I start with a poem?
Sure.
So I'm going to start with a Margaret Wheatley poem. There is no power greater than a community discovering what it cares about. Ask what's possible, not what's wrong. Keep asking. Notice what you care about. Assume that many others share your dreams. Be brave enough to start a conversation that matters. Talk to people you know. Talk to people you don't know. Talk to people you never talk to. Be intrigued by the differences you hear. Expect to be surprised. Treasure curiosity more than certainty. And I won't read the end of it, but I think that summarizes for me some of the timeless qualities of community.
I know it's cheating to have to ask somebody to go after a poem, but if somebody wants to build on that, or take it in a different direction.
I'm not sure it takes it in a different direction, but I just want to say that there is a way in which we've talked about community, often equating it with neighborhood, and community should mean something else. I think in one of your questions that you sent was about authentic community, which I chuckled at a little bit just because our father was an Episcopal priest, so the idea of authentic community has a kind of religious overtones. I thought, what is this meeting tonight? Didn't know if I needed to witness. But I do believe there is something to be drawn from those definitions of deep commitment to transparency and to a sense of shared belief and hope. Also a way of envisioning a future that's not just about us, but about the range of other possibilities that exist for those who are around us as well as those who will come after us. And so, you know, the transformational dimension of community is a kind of sense of what is possible and where we want to be centered.
Dr. Kim, Dr. Carey? I know I promised them this wouldn't be like, ask a question, all 4 people answer, ask a question, but we'll start that way.
I'll just add a quick thought, which is, I mean, one, the poem is beautiful, and I fully agree with Dr. Gadsden's remarks as well. I guess you know, and again, full disclosure, I work at a university. I work with a lot of schools, but you know, not in a school. And of course, there's a community within a school: the students, teachers, families, right, caregivers, staff, and there are circles that extend from there. But I don't think any institution exists in a vacuum either, right? There is a surrounding community, a neighborhood. That neighborhood also has, you know, unique features, a history. I'm sure stories that go back decades, probably even further. And there is power in having a really strong listening and learning relationship with a local community as well. And you know, unfortunately, again, I'm sure none of anybody's schools here, but there are schools that, you know, tend to sometimes say, okay, we're gonna kind of bring everybody inside the building, we're gonna close things off and just focus on what's in here as opposed to looking outside.
Yeah, Dr. Gasson took my answers. So, I don't know how you did that. But, so I think like one of the things that comes to mind that I think adds a little bit of texture is simply this: is that, you know, we did a study with kids, a lot of adolescents that we're working with here in Delaware around community. What is the community? And it changes, it shifts. It's not like when I think of community, you know, I think of, you know, Sesame Street, the people in your neighborhood, you know. But there's multiple communities. There's faith communities that kids are part of. There's families, multiple familial communities. There's sports teams that happen to exist in the school, right? So I don't like coming to this school, but I like going to my football team. That's my community. That's where I feel like I'm at turf, right? So I think that's something to really keep in mind. And the last group that I think the one thing we often don't think about is digital communities. Sites where people can have shared values and shared norms, like everything that my co-panelists have been saying, but it doesn't exist in the interpersonal and present. It's actually in the virtual space. So I think that, like my colleagues have been saying, is how do we respond to the community's S at the end that students maneuver in ways that is holistic, affirming, and inclusive.
So I have enough questions from their opening to ditch every other question I was going to ask, which is what I was hoping for. So the first is Dr. Kim, and I've known Youngwood forever, so I'm going to I found it fascinating that you said, well, I'm not a part of a school, I'm part of a university, which I think many of us would consider a school. So I guess my first question is like, and this kind of piggybacks, Dr. Curry, on what you were saying, when we think about school communities, right, what are we defining as their boundaries, right? How does, especially, you know, like when we have everything from universities to neighborhood schools to schools like SLA that draw from all over the city to virtual schools, like, how are we drawing, or let me rephrase it. Is it necessary? Why do we draw? How do we draw? Like, what do these boundaries of schools mean? Yeah, Lindy, I see you like, ready to jump in. Go ahead.
Yeah, Ken. Well, we used to do something back in the day. I'm an old-time coalition person, so we used to, in the 80s, begin school, I know this is being done now, drawing the portrait of the graduate. And I'm just trying to make some people cringe, but we used to do it on butcher block paper, on picnic tables, on a 3-day camping trip. We took 250 kids camping every year. I can't believe I can say that, but we really did. And I lived to tell the story. Yes, 250 kids every year. I did that for more than a decade. But this bullseye was what Rod was talking about. Student, family, community was the third word. So student, family, student, school, family, community, world, globe. This is the 80s. And then in the 90s, when I founded Boston Arts Academy, we did a very different thing to understand community. We got on a bus, a yellow school bus, because we too drew from the entire city of Boston. If anyone knows the racist history of the city of Boston, you know that it's very neighborhood based. And in each spot, we had a not-for-profit leader, person, a parent, family, person, and a student get on and talk to our new and veteran teachers, and importantly, our student teachers, about that community and how they saw it from a family perspective, from a kid perspective, and from a nonprofit perspective. Because what we were trying to do was to talk about asset-based community mapping, not I come from that bad neighborhood or that neighborhood where there's nothing. And that was really different, particularly for new teachers, young teachers, this notion of how do you map a community. So that's how we thought about it. And to this day, the Arts Academy is still doing a version of that.
Sorry, I promise that's the last time I'll touch that.
Yeah, sorry, the mic switch is a little twitchy. Yeah, what was I going to add to that? I was going to add, because that was so beautiful. Yeah, I don't draw like bright lines between a university and a school, and that certainly wasn't my intention there. It was more just, you know, I think there are some, you know, there obviously, as we know that there are certain things, certain affordances you get at different ages, right? And if you're obviously working with young students, you're going to do certain things. If you're doing with older students, what we try to do with our college-age students is offer the opportunities to be directly involved, directly partner with the local community. So from day one, I mean, during freshman orientation, right, there are tons of tours. There are always tours of campus, tours of buildings and all that. You know, we have tours of West Philadelphia, right, led by community members, right, who you know, get to meet with our students, get to show them some of the history. Again, more of an asset-based approach as opposed to, oh, don't go, I mean, the tour at some places used to be, oh, don't go be along that street, right? Don't go there, right? No, we don't do that. That's not to acknowledge, that's not to dismiss that there may be, you know, issues of crime and violence surrounding in West Philadelphia. Yes, there are, right? But there's so much depth, there's so many assets there. The other thing I'll point to is that what we've tried to do is create a space, a place in West Philadelphia that's off of our campus. It's called the Dornsife Center for Neighborhood Partnerships. We opened it about 10 years ago. It's in Mantua, right? A historic neighborhood in West Philadelphia that has been historically underserved as well. And it's in the Dornsife Center for Neighborhood Partnerships. It's a place where, yes, Drexel students, Drexel faculty and staff can also directly partner and engage with community organizations, community members. We have programs that are sponsored by Drexel academic units and staffed by students. Programs like digital literacy. There are many youth outreach, education, STEM outreach programs there as well. We have a community lawyering clinic, so that's staffed by our law school, so that our neighbors can get free legal advice on things. But everything there has been created, again, in partnership with the neighborhood. Right? It's not been Drexel saying, oh, we're going to plop this thing here and we're going to say, oh, these are the programs that are going to be here. I guess I have to qualify just a little bit. Almost everything we do is in partnership and in consultation with local civic associations, neighborhood associations, and is there to meet either a local need or a local challenge that we can solve together. That's the.
Anyone else want to add, or I can? So, yeah.
That was great, thanks. I believe strongly in the permeability of boundaries. And so it is a matter of, if I use the university because that's where I work, right? For me, it's important for universities to do all that they can to reach all the areas around them, and to perhaps reconceptualize those areas as a part of our community. And so if it's a part of our community, it's both our reaching out and creating, you know, alliances with folks, but it's also the opportunity for those communities to reach into the university. And that reciprocity has yet to exist. I remember when, Kat is here somewhere, when we had a small project called Penn Futures, and we wanted to do some work in other parts of Philadelphia, and then we were told that apparently the universities have these unspoken boundaries where, you know, we can step, and I was confused, and I still am. Because in addition to all of this being our community, it's about the relationships that the universities could create between and among themselves
Right.
that would ensure, that would affect more positive change for all the people. I mean, we sit in West Philadelphia, we are so safe in that space where we are, and then there are people right down the way who are struggling every day. So how is it that those people actually get to talk, to us in a way that can affect meaningful change?
And it's not like there aren't kids from North Philadelphia who go to Penn, who just because they live near Temple doesn't mean that the neighborhood, that they don't have something to say about how Penn could impact neighborhoods beyond West Philadelphia and be impacted by those people.
Well, we have a project called the Youth Engagement Research Project, right? That I do with there at Penn. And a couple of your students are still there. They're wonderful. Magda and Nora is two of them. But that project is specially designed for young people to, first of all, voice their opinions about the political process and all the things that contribute to it. But part of it is that they do culturally grounded and community-focused project. And one of the big conversations is what constitutes a community for them. They're quite brilliant. And what they choose as a community is not necessarily what I might have thought.
That's right.
That they would. And so I think it's a really, a complex set of circumstances.
Did you wanted to add, or can I ask you the next question?
Yeah.
So, Dr. Perry,
Oh, no.
you brought up the idea of the virtual community, and I want to problematize that,
Sure.
right? Because I think one of the things that when we think about school is that schools are struggling with that notion of keeping kids in the moment, in the now, because so much of their community can be found outside the walls, and now they can access them, right? And the cell phone debate and what have you. Leaving aside the cell phone part, because we'd be here all night. And you can take it if you like, but just we'll be here all night. The question I have here about the digital communities is, are we seeing a moment where the digital communities that people are forming are actually becoming dissonant with their face-to-face communities, right? When we see, the rise of the alt-right online, when we see people bifurcating, like being able to find like-minded people all over the country or all over the world, but then pulling back from the face-to-face. I won't say real, because I want to honor their things, but from the face-to-face. So how do we, when we think about schools, when we think about honoring the people and making sure they feel valued where they are, how does this dual nature of community change that, problematize it, help it, hurt it?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question.
Use the active page if necessary.
I know, right? Taking notes on the side of this name tag thing.
Can we get a notepad? Somebody, please.
It's all good, no worries. I think the first thing, Chris, is to acknowledge it. I think that there's the first thing is that we have to realize that there's school cultures, there's family cultures, but there's also youth culture, and it is rapidly shifting. So I was a high school English teacher back in Washington, D.C., but I don't claim to understand the youth world now in the same way that I did back when I was more interacting with them. And like Dr. Gasson, I have projects in multiple high schools in the state of Delaware, but I don't assume that I understand everything about the kid. I have to understand their world, I have to talk to them about things. Like for instance, I assumed that they all were into Instagram. And my boys were like, nah, we got off of that. And I was like, why'd you get off of that? He's like, well, it was like a fake world. It wasn't real life. And I felt like I was comparing myself to these fake people. And I was like, yo, you mean to tell me that these teenage black boys aren't on Instagram as much as I thought they were? Completely troubled my whole understanding about things, But I will say this, to add to your point, I think that it's essential that we sit with people, that we talk with them, that we understand their worlds, and that we try to bring them into the building, bring these worlds into the building to understand what they're doing, how they're making meanings of things. Because I think that we're missing the mark if we do things how they were done before. I'll say one more thing about your point. I had the fortune to have a conversation with Richard Reeves, who wrote a book about boys and men that's really popular right now. And he was talking a lot about how boys and men are not going to college and they're not. And I'm like, what's the point in going to college if you can do everything, you can figure everything out on YouTube, right? You know, you can go on YouTube, and people are becoming so much more retreatist, right? They don't want to live in dorms anymore. I had kids that I was working with after COVID that said, yo, I wish COVID would come back, Dr. Carey. And I'm like, why? He's like, because these kids be getting on my nerves, they be fighting in here all the time, talking about the kids in school. I wish COVID would come back so I could just go home. So I feel like what we're experiencing, even as adults, like many of us are really happy when people cancel plans with us. Let's be real. Like what's happening with us is what happened with the kids too. So I really think it's important that we think about that as well. So there's a lot to it. There's a lot to it.
Anyone else want to take that one?
Can I add?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely, and I think, well, youth culture always changes. It's always going to change, and one of the hard things, you know, about being educators is that we just keep getting older and older. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, those of us with teenagers, right, know that, you know, so often their preferred way of socializing is not hanging out in person. It's online. It's digital. It's gaming together. It is on Discord. It is doing, you know, other things. And that is, again, and I'm not diminishing that at all. I mean, that is socializing for them. I think we as educators often struggle because that's not how we did it. And I don't know how to break through sometimes, right? I mean, one of the hardest things we have as a university is actually now getting our students to actually show up to things, right? That there's just, you know, much less of a, okay, we're gonna announce it, we're gonna have a big thing, we're gonna have pizza, right? That used to be the magic thing, right? Pizza, and then students will just show up. And they've stopped showing up. I mean, some will, some will. And then we're like, but they're not reading their email. They're not, you know, how do we, oh, and everybody's answer is, oh, we have to post about it on social media. No, we're just not connecting in the ways that a lot of our students are looking for. And I haven't solved that.
Right.
I just want to highlight that.
Because I think that's the hard part, right? And that's the question that I think we're trying to grapple with, right? Like I look at my older son, who is at college, but his idea of socializing on a Saturday night is getting on Discord with his friends from high school, which is cool and all, but he's in college, and we're like, go do things in college. But I think that at every level, yeah, you could do that from our bedroom, it's cheaper. But I think the question that I have is Youngwoo's question, which is, how do we break through? How do we bring people, if it's not the pizza, how do we bring people back to the face-to-face? In our schools, this is true of teacher conferences, this is true of at every level. Again, like your point that somebody can't, what's that? I don't have to go out this Saturday night? No. Thank God, we're in my pajamas, right? Like, so how do we, what are your ideas? How do we do that?
Can I just add, you know, I come from an arts background, so I always think about making and doing. It's very hard to make music on Zoom or online. It's very hard. You can do it, people do. They do it around the world. They make movies around the world like that, but it's much more satisfying. So I ran an art school, and you know, those kids are there till 7 at night. They're there at 6 in the morning because there's a dance concert to produce, there's a visual art show to hang, there's a theater. You know, Joe Turner's coming, guys. It's about to go on. Pippin's about to be done. You can't do a musical online. So you know, I think the arts and I think sports are very different. It doesn't have the same emotional pull, but I think it's equally very hard to play basketball online. Because you know, you just don't do that. And so I think the more school can be about making and doing, the better off we're going to be. And kids want to make and do. I don't care what age they are. They want to make and do. But we've created school to be kind of stupid. And there isn't, and I'm not saying here, obviously, there isn't a lot of making and doing. There's a lot of reciting, there's a lot of memorization, there's a lot of kind of stupid stuff, and that's why you get the kids saying, I don't need to go to college, you know, because if you're not making and doing, what's the point, right? So if your graduation capstone is a very complicated making and doing, you know, that's a different equation.
So with that leads me back into the question about schools, which is, what, for you all, what would our school communities look like, feel like, act like, mean, if they were designed, if we have this moment post-COVID where we could redesign, where we can go from the ground up, especially if we think about asking the folks who haven't felt welcome in school. Like, what does it mean if we redesign our schools, our communities in our schools, and we make sure intentionally that we redesign them with the voices of those who have felt long felt not included? Yeah, once again, use backup page if necessary. We can chunk that. We can, like, I can, like, we have any special ed teachers in the house, we can chunk the class, and I'm bad at that.
Sure. Well, I'll start, and then please feel free to pick up. I mean, so I think it starts with honoring the communities that are already there. Right? They are there. They may not exist in the same sort of physical form as they did pre-COVID, right? And there may not be as many students hanging out and play. I'm thinking from a university lens. Sorry, but to start with the communities that are there, and then to recognize that it's, you know, I'm going to use it. Sorry, I work in STEM. I work in engineering, so I'm going to use an engineering example, right? That the traditional stereotypes around, you know, what an engineer looks like, what a computer scientist looks like, you know, what a techie person looks like, are just crazy wrong, right? They're just crazy wrong, and the tech industry has done a huge disservice to, you know, well, really the world. But and starting to recognize that there are, you know, like certainly at our university, there are groups of, you know, like we just last night at the Excite Center, we had a blurred, B-L-E-R-D, from our Black Student Union, Black Nerd night of a game night, you know, discussion panel, right? Just, I mean, and again, this is the first time they've done that, and they got a lot of attention, a lot of buy-in around that. Recognizing that if you try to go back to, oh, this is engineering club, this is how it works, this is how we do it, this is robotics club, this is we show up here at this time and we log in here and all that, right? You are going to exclude, right? If you do it the old way, right? And it's insidious, it really is. And I constantly am checking myself. We're trying to check each other on this, right? That there are just things that are built in. Oh, if you came from a more affluent school, you probably have more of a technical background and can do certain things with a computer, right? Just know it because you've done it. Maybe if you came from a less affluent background, you don't have that, and then all of a sudden there's a barrier, right? That those things just happen. So I would try to build around the communities that have emerged and try to connect more, and you know, and then again, you don't need to force combinations, but proximity. Right? Hey, there's Black Nerd Night, there's a Drexel Gaming Association, there is a board game night. Maybe there are things that we can do to try to encourage those groups to you know, bump up against one another.
Anyone want to take on one of the things that I heard among the many things that Emily just said was this idea of the barriers. And I think about schools and I think about the barriers that exist. And if we are to recreate community, what are some of the barriers you would like to see schools not become?
I want to see kids teaching more. You know, that was really important to me as a principal. I had a student curriculum committee. I had students co-teaching, developing coursework alongside teachers so that they were really invested in what they were teaching. I think we forget about how important that is. We had a project week that turned into a project month. We wondered why we had school anymore and why we just didn't, you know, and kids were running all that. And some of the stuff was, to me, kind of, I didn't understand it, but it was you know, everyone was engaged. So I always feel like we gotta ask the kids, always, and we have to put kids at the table with us the same way we were talking about community. I always, when I go and I'm coaching in schools, I always ask the principals now, tell me about your partners, tell me about how you set the table with them. And I'm always amazed that principals tell me that they're running meetings at 7 a.m. with their community partners, because their community partners operate till 10 at night, and 7 a.m. is really early. And so they wonder, principals complain that they can't get the partners to the table. And I'll say, well, you got a stupid time you're doing it. You need to have those meetings later at night. So I always want to ask, just keep asking, what would it take to change those barriers? Yeah, and I do think, Chris, you asked us a question that I want to make sure we get to, because I do think it's one of our issues, which is this question about tolerance and ideologies, because I do think that's part of the problem.
Oh, we're getting it, don't worry.
I just want to make sure, because I think that is part of the issue.
Yeah. So before we get to the challenges of the moment in which we live, because again, we're here all night. Any other questions about how we look at these barriers that exist and how schools can do a better job of not just feeling inclusive, but actually being inclusive communities. What needs to change?
So I found everyone has said really interesting because there's a question of the building of community within the school itself and a kind of perspective about who's included and who's not. And then the community surrounding the actual physical building of the school. This is hard work, and I think I just really want to say that the idea that it's going to, it's dedicated work that's incremental in terms of its success, and and the building where that's called the school just needs to be a place where people feel they're welcomed. That doesn't solve everything. But to feel welcomed, it means a kind of education of everyone in the school. And I love your point about students as teachers. In our little project, they are, what they do is they do these projects that are their own research projects. Because, I tell them I work in a university, I do research. So. And research isn't just about, the big cancer cure. It's an important cure, but it's all of those other things. And I'm struck by the fact that these kids, they come from about 10 schools in Philadelphia and elsewhere, and some of them are in places outside of Philadelphia, like Michigan and Indiana, who come in online. But they show up on Saturdays at 10 o'clock in the morning. I am stunned. I don't want to be anywhere at 10 o'clock. I can't tell them that. But they come and they stay for 3 hours. And they write these projects, and they are phenomenal. And they have looked around their schools and their communities, and they have topics that are on health equity and some of what we're going to talk about today, the ways in which the media may not represent the true views. They do things about hostile architecture and the homeless. They talk to people who do research, and then they go talk to community members as well. They write a concept paper that I put through the institutional review at Penn because I want them to understand how that works. They are so excited by that. Oh, Penn gave approval. I'm like, don't be that excited. But we have people who are on the ground, who are community people who come talk on Saturdays, and we have people who are professors who come talk. And all of them are just so stunned at the investment in these kids. And so they are imagining community and complexity of community in a way that I don't think we are even, thinking about it. Anyway, so it's just a kind of sense of how do we prepare, once again, how do we prepare teachers? We do a lot of talk and teacher education programs about this, but nothing necessarily concrete that demonstrates, as I said before, the ways in which we go in and out of that building called school. And so it's a reimagining of who we can be.
Yeah, I think for so many of us, we were kind of indoctrinated that school is important, and it certainly is. But I think that what schools need to think about differently is that it's not that the school is important, it's that we actually need schools to make kids feel like they're important, all right? So that's a reframing, right? And that gets at why we need to have community, and why do we need teachers to show up and not say, value this STEM. No, be vulnerable. Show me that you're human. Because if you're not going to show me that you're human, that means you're not going to show me that we can connect and that you're going to understand my community and where I come from. I think another thing is that we just have to create buildings that are like rubber, more flexible, less rigid, less tied to themselves. I run this thing called the Black Boy Mattering Project, and one of the things that the kids said to me, like, hey, Dr. Carey, I was like, what's one thing that we can do to help you feel like you matter here in this school? And they were like, get me out of it. And I was like, he's like, no, like a field trip. And I was like, ooh, field trip. So at some point, like in middle school, y'all just stopped taking the kids on field trips. This big, giant 18-year-old boy was taller than me, and he was like, yo, I'm gonna go on a field trip. So, man, that day I organized a field trip, right? Got him to an art museum. We've done that for the last 5 years. And then on next Friday, we're gonna be at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. You know, we're going actually out of state this time. We're going to go see the exhibit over there, right? And it's just because it makes the kids feel like they're special, you know? I think another thing we need to do is allow kids, and this is resonates with my man Ozzy back there. Like when I walked in this building, I was one of the first people who got here. And they're like, Ozzy, show him where he needs to go. I'm like, Ozzy, this is great. Ozzy runs this building, all right? That's not like how it is in some of the schools I work in. You know, the kids are kind of, they're a little bit, they're seen almost as if like enemies of their own school. They're not allowed in certain parts of the building. They're not allowed to touch this or be down that hallway and this and that, right? And I think what that makes kids feel is that they feel detached from their learning. They feel detached from their buildings. So one other thing I think, I've been writing about mattering, I keep bringing it back to it. You know, there's a school that I partner with, and they have students with severe special needs in the building. And again, they're cordoned off. But kids in my project are just like, yo, we can walk them to the bathroom, we can take them to lunch. Why don't they ask us to help them? That's feeling like you matter, you know? I feel relied upon. That's mattering. I think one of the things we need to do is help kids feel like they matter in these buildings. You got these 18-year-olds that are smart, like my man Ozzy back there, you know, so much more capable of what they're asked to do. So I think that that's really, really important. So more embedded opportunities for mentoring and leadership, authentic leadership in schools is another thing that I think can help break down these barriers.
Can I just add?
Yeah, please.
Because one of the issues is that the adults don't feel that they matter. So the kids are in a building with adults that don't feel that they matter, and so the modeling, because we've had 25 years of NCLB not mattering.
That's real.
So, you know, if you think about historically what happened, we had from the late 80s up till about 2000, we had a short window then where big ideas, that's the school emerging, big ideas, that was the era, that was Papa Bush. Then we got Baby Bush and the Texas Miracle and No Child Left Behind. And so we're still in that. So I taught with teachers who the idea of a field trip, they've never taken a field trip. Those teachers have not been to a museum, to a play. So, you know, things that I talk about like that were easy, we always opened school making food together. Didn't matter whether we were making food outside, didn't matter, courtyard, sidewalk, that's how school opened. We all made food together. Every year we would go to movies together. Every year, plays, art museums. That was run of the mill. That was like just normal.
Yeah.
But now I talk to teachers and the idea of a field trip, no money, no bus,
Yeah.
I can't even get outside, and I'm still teaching 150 kids.
Yeah.
So we really have created structural issues, and the only thing for teachers right now is, can the kids pass that test? So that mattering, I think you are so right, that it is about, of course it's about content, but it's also about that relationship. And if we don't figure out that, we're gonna lose another generation.
So I wanna, oh, go ahead, I'm so
So
sorry.
you just made me think of something. We had a huge project here with Head Start, and I was stunned when I went over to one of the schools, because in many elementary schools, the fourth grade teacher doesn't even know that there's a Head Start program in the school. But what was more striking was that the parents weren't allowed to come inside the school. So when we were collecting the data, I'm thinking we're gonna walk on in and get this information. And all the parents were lined up, not able to go into school. And if you can't go into the school, you're not going to feel a sense of community. You're not going to feel a sense of oneness. Because the building, if the building could be, if we thought of school as something more than the building, it would embrace, you know, all the people who are important.
So it's interesting, so today was parent-teacher conferences the last 2 days. And in the new era in which we are living, all the families want Zoom conferences. And so you have to offer them, right? Because families want them. And we had a parent that we really wanted to get in. Their child was having a tough transition to high school. And she came in, and and her advisor said, we really would love to sit with you. And we brought her in, we talked with the kid, we talked with her. And at the end of it, Mom said to me, thank you for making me come in. Like, she was like, it matters to see it. But the funny thing is, and I agree, I hate Zoom, right? Like, and it makes me so frustrated that, again, we do the things, right? Like, we have advisory, so we get 90% attendance for parent conferences because there is one adult that is your point of contact, all the things, right? Karen Mack, yay. And, yeah. But when parents say, like, yeah, but can't you accommodate me and give me Zoom? And then you have to because you want to, but place still matters, right? So it's this question of, like, how do we honor the fact that parents work, parents this, parent that, parents want it to be a little easier, and yet there is missing that authenticity when you can't walk in the building, you can't look your child's principal in the eye and say, I need you to do more for my kid, or all of the things, right? Like, and it's different when there's,
Can you make one on Zoom and one in person?
well, the problem is, the challenge is if a parent says, I really want to do it on Zoom, you want them to do it on Zoom, right? You're trying to be accommodating, right? Like, but it's this fascinating thing, the very thing that you're trying to do, which is make sure every parent, that you're knocking down a barrier, make sure that every parent can come in, maybe that isn't doing the thing you're thinking you're doing, right? As we have learned with all of these tools. So I throw that out there as I don't have any, I'm actually,
Could I urge you?
Yeah, please, go
Could I
for it.
urge you to be patient on that? I mean it.
Yeah.
So, because it's with everybody, right? It's not just for parents.
Yeah.
So I'm a tri-chair of the Faculty Senate, and during COVID, we were all online.
Right.
When we got back, we were not supposed to be online, but people just wouldn't show up.
Yeah.
And we have struggled and struggled, and what we have done over the past 3 years is just keep making people say, keep saying rather to people that we really need you to show up in person. And talking to them directly, and every time we meet, and that's right. And so the number of people online has declined significantly, but that's over time. And I think there is something to be said about, giving people a sense that, if you're not here in person, it's a very different experience. Then reminding them or encouraging them in a way that gives them a sense of belonging. I know you do that. Yeah, I know you do that.
Not saying we do it perfectly, but
and the sense of their value to whatever is going to happen that day.
I want to return to this question of belonging and barriers, and this is another one that I think, and I want to, so world according to Lehman, no option to buy. One of the challenges, I said world according to Lehman, no option to buy, so you can disagree with even the premise of this. One of the challenges of high school specifically is that in addition to all of the things we say we want it to be, it is a ranking and sorting system for all of you. And one of the challenges for schools, even the ones that are trying to make sure that every child feels a sense of belonging, is as long as a kid can look around and say, that kid's grades are higher than mine, that kid's grades are higher than mine, so why am I here? Right? As long as school has this dual purpose, which is for the child, but also for this larger question of the post-secondaries want us to tell them, and try telling the college, we don't class rank. It's not always easy. We don't either, but that doesn't mean they don't push back. So how do you, given that there are still these things called grades, how should schools work to make sure that even with grades, we make sure that every kid feels value and worth beyond the transcript? What does that look like? And again, we had some ideas, the arts, sports, right? And I was at practice at 7 o'clock this morning. Zenny and Ozzy were with me. So yes, but those are by fiat. Those are the kids who happen to play a sport, or the kids who happen to find an art, finds their way into an after-school activity. Those are the extracurricular. How do we ensure that the curriculum makes every kid feel seen, belong, seen, welcome, valued? What does that look like?
I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say, by totally ignoring college admissions.
Tell that to the parents.
I know, I'm one of them too.
Actually, that's a great point. Tell that to kids, because then kids, I'm gonna be a bad moderator and interrupt. Because kids will look at you and say, yeah, but I need to get into college, right?
And there are 250 amazing colleges and universities, at least in this country, right? There are definitely more than the 8 schools of the Ivy League or the 12 schools of the Ivy Plus. There are hundreds of really awesome colleges and universities. That doesn't entirely solve the problem. The college admissions game, as we know, is, I hate to use this phrase because it's been co-opted, it is completely rigged. It is completely rigged. So if you are trying to, I think part of it is acknowledging the utter randomness of that process, right? And that.
I think Zen and Ozzy just threw up in the back row.
Sorry.
But I agree with you. I used to say as a principal exactly what you said, and I had copies of Lauren Pope's book that I would give out to parents, and I think it's a really good book to give out to parents still, because what he talks about are the colleges you don't have, not the Ivies. And 40% of kids transfer after their first year. Kids need to know that. And at least the way I used to rig it is I'd say, you're going where you're getting money, period.
Right.
And, because I wrote a book about what happens when you don't go and you owe so much money, you don't finish. So no, you cannot go to that school that did not give you money. I don't care if it's Tufts. They didn't give you money and you're going to UMass because that's where you're going. And otherwise I'll never talk to you again. So I don't care what parents say. I'm really awful with parents on this one because I have had too many graduates in debt, not finished to this day. And their credit scores are done and they do not live well in this world because of that game. So I was really a bulldog on this issue. And every year I would meet with parents, not once, not twice, at least 10 times, and say, the Ivies are the Ivies, and I'm in Boston. No one should go to Harvard as an undergraduate. Terrible undergraduate. Because they really don't do
I like that she turned her mic off for that, right? The live
I teach
stream
at the
did not
grad
pick
school.
that up.
I teach at the grad school, but it's too much. It's too much. So I don't think those are good places for kids. And I know the good places. And I brought in the good places that I knew. Northeastern? No, not in my era. Couldn't do it. So I was really clear with parents about where your kid could go and the money that a community college buys you. And then you can transfer to a 4-year because it's about money. Because you do not want to be leaving school in debt. So I don't play that game with kids or parents. And you can tell them, I get pissed off about it now. And I haven't been a high school principal for 10 years.
If I could just then tag on to that, because yeah, I realize you can't completely ignore college admissions, but it is nowhere near as important as most people think, right? And from a high schooler or a high school standpoint, right? How do you maximize, of course, what you can do as an individual, right? What are the things that you actually are interested and want to pursue? Put that into your transcript, put that into your essay. Right? It's not about meeting some arbitrary standard. It never has been. Anybody who believed it was a meritocracy, like I did when I was in high school, right, has long since been proven wrong. So do the best you can in the situation that you have. Do the things that are the most meaningful and important to you, right? And that, again, I can't say this to university, but in more often than not, there will be really good options afterwards.
Yeah, I agree. I used to call it the visitation, the college visitation, the religion of college visits. And so we have 4 children, and I said, well, you know, if we're not going to visit everywhere, and but why don't you get accepted somewhere, and then we're going to visit any place you want to go. And they got from college, but we had to separate ourselves from this idea that, exactly what you said, that they needed, all of them needed to go, you know, to an Ivy, and say, who, and I have tried to live with this, by this rule, who is the human being I want to see if I'm fortunate to see these children at 25, 30, and 35, whatever. And that kind of dictated how I helped them manage the decisions around college. One of the things I kind of love about our project, you see I love these kids, I don't see them in the morning, is that I have never let people call it a college prep program. We want the kids to go to college, but that's not why they're there. They're there to find out who they are and to find out their opinions. And so I know it's extraordinarily hard for parents to let go of that idea that if you don't go to Harvard, or if you don't go to Penn, or wherever, 2 different places I have to say now, 2 very different places, that somehow you're not going to be a success in life. And then what does it mean to be, and then that's also redefining what it means to be a success in life.
So, I agree with all of this, and I'm going to problematize it. It's fascinating to me that we are saying this now at a time where, for the first time, there are more Black women in college than any other demographic, at a time when we are seeing Black men go to college at a higher rate than another time. So, at a moment when all of a sudden we finally are making some inroads into higher ed around the folks who've been historically excluded, we're now saying, well, maybe college doesn't matter as much as we think it does, and maybe it's not as represented. So I'm curious, and again, Dr. Carey, you know, with the Black Women Mattering Project, I'm curious, how do you, when you sit down and talk to a young Black man who's considering higher ed, my life after high school, what does this look like to you to make sure that they feel like that they are valued where they are, and that that value will lead them to an intelligent choice for what's next?
Well, you know, the focus of the project really isn't on college admission, but we do ask questions about your future selves, like where do you want to go, what kind of life do you want to live, and you know, what kind of career would help you get that life. But I think like I'm checking on kind of the well-being and the self-concepts of the kids that I work with. You know, and as someone who teaches undergrads, I taught 40-something last semester. I got another 30-something upcoming. I see everything. I see, and I think what I want. How can I say this diplomatically?
Please don't.
It's like, give me a whole student, like a whole, like if you're whole, meaning, I've had high achievers. I even wrote a letter of recommendation for a student the other day, and I was like, the reason why I'm writing this letter of recommendation, why she should get into this program, is not because she got an A. I think anybody can do that. It's because she's kind, she's considerate, she asked about people, she made friends with people at her table. By the end of the semester, it seemed like the people in the group, they had known each other forever, they were so close. And I attribute that to her people skills, and of course you should accept her into your community, into your psych program. That's why she'll be a good social worker. You dig what I'm saying? It's not because she got an A. I mean, I got students who get A's with grade rubbers. You know what I mean by that? I can tell a grade rubber. Hey, Dr. Carey, can you read this 6-page essay before it's due and give me feedback? I'm not going to structure the learning for all of you and then each one of you. I don't have the capacity for it. Sorry, it's a research-one university. So I think that's something that's important to think about. Having integrity. I think the other thing that we're seeing in higher ed, particularly at the undergraduate level, students with a lot of mental health challenges, students who are feeling high levels of anxiety and depression, the same things I'm sure that you all are seeing in your own high schools and certainly in grad school, sure, it's definitely in the Ivy Leagues, for sure. But we can deal with that. What's harder to deal with are students who don't know how to seek help. So we spend millions at the University of Delaware providing resources to students that get underutilized. We got help centers, writing centers, anything you can possibly imagine we have at UD to help a kid find success. And they have to learn how to navigate all of that. So I think that one thing that I would encourage, if I have a 4-year-old, so my child is not on the college track right now, but she kind of is actually, you know. She really is. But, you know, it's like, do you know how to ask questions? Do you know how to speak up for yourself? You know, are you back there, are you kind of, it's a poem, like, are you waving or are you drowning? You know, or is that, you know? So I think it's important that those are the types of skills that we equip students with. They'll be successful regardless of where they go to Howard, Harvard, Spelman, wherever, you know, so.
Actually, we're not saying that they shouldn't go to college. I want to be really clear.
Yes, I'll say that.
Okay, no. It's just that, and not even saying, I don't know about Harvard, but not even saying they shouldn't go to the I don't know. I have some similar feelings, but and not even saying not to go to the Ivy League, but to figure out what a good undergraduate experience will look like that will allow you to have the intellectual depth and breadth that you want, as well as the humanity. And that could, well, my undergrads, I mean, I don't teach undergraduates at Penn, but I know many of them. You know, they are doing phenomenal stuff. They are great human beings. And they have figured out how to navigate that place in a way that is really outstanding. And so it's not that, it's really trying to find that balance. And so that if a young person doesn't get accepted to that person's first choice, that there are many choices in life. And it really does depend on how much you are going to invest in your own development during that time.
So I want to take this and make sure we bring it back to this idea of community, right? So now you have a school that is valuing all of the kids in the different ways, in the different pathways, in the different outcomes that their high school career will lead to. What does it look like to you when divergent paths are celebrated inside a school, right? So how is it that, what does it look like for you when the school celebrates the Ivy Leaguer, the trade school, the person who decides they're going to spend their late teens and early 20s trying to make it big on Twitch and YouTube, but all of the sort of, you know, the entrepreneur, what does it look like when a school says, we value all of these outcomes?
Doesn't it look like SLA?
Okay, that's cheating, you didn't have to do that, and I'll give you the $20 later, but, exactly.
I mean, honestly, my first answer was to me, it looks like a school community that, you know, where students support one another, they show up for each other, right? Aren't divided into, you know, just by activity, by group, by age, whatever it is, right? That if, you know, if there's a sports event, if there's ultimate, that there are kids out there supporting that. If they're participating in a robotics competition, those kids are from ultimate are supporting those kids. If there's a play, it's, I think that's what it looks like. And again, that's what just drew me back to this.
I ran a school like that, and the kid that became the barber was as celebrated as the kid that, you know, went on to do an MBA, because we need everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it has to start very young. You know, we every year took kids to college visits, the visitation. That was something teachers were responsible for doing, not family members, because we understood that that was not something most families in our community could do. And so it was in, you know, 9th grade that kids started going to visit schools and then talking in advisory about, do I see myself there, or do I see myself here? You know, what does that look like? And then bringing back alums, particularly right before Thanksgiving, because that's the big dropout time, right? You know, kids don't want to go back after that first trimester. And how do you help kids sustain college when they've gone? But I think that question of community is, how do we talk about different career paths and different ways in? Our requirement was you had to know what you were doing after graduation, career or college. You did not have to go to college. So I think, you know, that's really important, that kids understand that the military is an option, that barber school, massage school, you know, these are legitimate careers.
If you ever saw the CTE student from another school who gave me a haircut when we were at 440, you would know that barbering is a very essential skill for young kids.
I mean, I wish all schools had CTE.
Right.
I'm really a proponent, so, you know, VA now has 4 CTE. I just think that is the way high school should be. If I were reinventing high school, we would all be career and technical schools.
I just want to jump in on that. I think, like, you know, I think the average college student changes their major like 7 times or something, right? So, like, I spent a lot of time thinking about how kids think about the future, and it's like, yo, are you studying like how kids are predicting? Not at all. Not at all. I don't, you know, it's not about that. There is part of that is a predictive element, you know what I mean? I'm sure that all of you who have high school seniors are thinking that, yeah, I'm going to be a doctor, but you very well might be a vet, or you very well might be a biology teacher. A lab technician, or you very well might just go ahead and be a florist. You know, my college roommate, who is still one of my closest friends, is actually the godfather of my 4-year-old. He told me he was going to be a doctor freshman year in college. And he did the bio major and did all of that. And he did become a doctor. But he's a teacher, the 3rd grade teacher. He's a doctorate at one of the teachers' college, right? Didn't do medical school, did a different kind of doctor, right? So I think when we think about what kids are doing when they finish high school, it's just one path. Like Robert Frost writes about, way leads on to way. We're just trying to get a kid on a way. We don't know where they're going to end up. You know, one way leads on to another way. I just want to make sure that my daughter ends up on a one way that's positive, and if that doesn't work out for her, that she's going to end up somewhere else. And I think that that's honoring the unique potential, the unique attributes of students in schools will help them do that. It makes sense that you would want to be a barber. I see you playing in people's hair all the time. You're real fashionable. You know what I mean? I see that. That makes sense. You dig? But you could do something else with that. You know, but barber, that might be a good way for you to start with. You know, so those are the types of things I think we need to think about.
Switching gears, because I think we can talk about sort of the pathways that schools create all night long, but there is another piece of this idea of community, and that is the ideologies that people are walking in the door with. And, you know, this is being live streamed, so I guess I might violate an executive order or two with the next piece of what we're doing here. We are living in a moment, right, where I am concerned as a school leader that it is going to be harder to build community when what seems to be valued outside of our walls is the idea of tearing down. And that ridicule and blame and fill in however many adjectives you want after that seem to be the currency of the day. And all of those, to me at least, work against the idea of community unless those communities are homogenous of thought, which I don't think are necessarily healthy places, even if it were a homogeny of people who think like me, right? Like that would A, get boring, and B, nobody wants that. So my first question is, how do schools maintain an open dialogue in this moment while also still, like, you know, if we go back to Karl Popper's, like the paradox of tolerance, how do we encourage people to bring their ideas to school while also recognizing that some of those ideas could actually tear down the very thing we're trying to build? I told you no easy questions. I've stumped the panel. No, I know, wait time is important. I know, I was a teacher once.
You know, I mean, it's interesting that everyone here is in higher ed. You know, currently I am as well, and we've done such a terrible job in higher ed. So I don't think you want to talk to us. I think you want to talk to the kids again, you know, because it's really terrifyingly bad, you know, what's happened on has been happening on my campus. But I love the way you framed it, this paradox of tolerance, and what do we do if there's some of those very things young people want to tear down. And the only thing I can think of, and I really do want to hear other people on this, is I go back to my making and doing, and Carrie talks about mattering, and I think it's very similar. If we're engaged with our hands, I'm really about that. If we're building a set together, if we're creating something that's about to go live, I really think it's a different undertaking. First of all, it's that thing over there we're doing. We are doing, I'm going to use theater for a minute. We're doing that play together, and that play has themes that we all have to debate. We're also going to do a talk back with the audience, and the audience isn't trained. So we have to figure out how to train the audience to get the kinds of things we want back. If we're in a school where we're continually doing exhibitions of mastery, and I'm using words from back in the day, where we're demonstrating what we know in community, it's a different thing, right? Because there is that third teacher, if you will. And I don't think enough of that goes on. So I think what we get are assemblies, which are the kiss of death for this kind of thing, you know, or panels, kiss of death for that kind of thing, because you can't, I mean, we're not having a
The rest of the weekend is all discursive, I promise.
Yeah. You know, you just can't, I mean, I don't want to go too deep into this, but I had a student, I won't go, I'll do it offline, but it was tragic what a student of mine tried to put together, but it was too didactic. And people just couldn't engage with the controversy he wanted to engage with.
Other thoughts?
I mean, nothing particularly helpful. Yeah, obviously, it's such a challenging time. I mean, on so many levels. I guess the one thing I was going to add is that it feels a little different this time. It feels a little bit less. I think 2016 was a little more like, how did that other sports team finally won, right? And our team lost, and we were favored by a zillion points, right? And it was more like, again, sports and culture are another really challenging thing too. But it felt like, people were just showing up because their team had finally won, right? And this time it feels very different, I think. So I think as educators, I mean, in higher ed, there are going to be, and I oversee our university's Civic 101 class, which is all of our first year students take it. It's the introduction to civic engagement, right? And you have to start to, all of our instructors talked about this, right? Start to discern early on. Is this a student who's just sort of like celebrating in the end zone, right? Just because, hey, I'm here, I've never been here before, I got spiked ball, right? Or are they, really trying to bring up something that is, authentic to their experience? And again, they can be both, but, are they trying to really, start a discussion in good faith, right? And that's hard, but that's why we're educators. That's why we're trained, and to try to tease some of that out. And it can be a path to dialogue. Right? And I guess I will say this, so most of my observations are of, undergraduate students, in higher education. I'm also the parent of a teenager, and I help coach his robotics team, and so I do hang out with a lot of 10th, 11th graders as well. A student's ability to start conversations on very difficult topics, right, oftentimes far exceeds, right, an instructor or facilitator's ability to try to shepherd that discussion. So Some of this is trusting our students and giving them some space, but then once in a while recognizing when they're in the end zone trying to spike the football.
Right.
So there was an approach to teaching several years ago called facilitative instruction. And it kind of moved the idea of teaching into facilitating thought, as opposed to telling someone what knowledge is. And I think that a reminder that allowing someone to offer a point of view, even though it's a very different and perhaps problematic point of view, doesn't mean you have to believe it. And understanding what discourse is, what dialogue is, and the back and forth of that. And I think that, as you were saying, young people come up with their own truths and their own beliefs. We should be providing space for those to come to the surface.
Sure.
Also protecting them
Right.
at the same time. You know,
So let's break this down to very, very concrete things with this, which is, you know, and I'll use SLA. Good God, nobody watched the live stream. But we were, or we are, the first school in the district, in the Commonwealth, excuse me, to have all gender bathrooms as the primary bathrooms. For us, it has been a success. There's no such thing as a panacea. Obviously, there are bathrooms are hotspots in high schools no matter what you do. But, by creating that space, not only have we made it safer for our non-binary students, for our transgender students, we changed what the bathrooms felt like for everyone. And I will argue that while, yes, we unintentionally made it easier to have sex in the larger stall, on the live stream, way to go. It's not like I might need something stronger. It's not like that wasn't happening in schools beforehand. And it's easier to blame, because now you can say, well, da-da-da, but they've found other places. And why I'm scared about putting this on the live stream is that I'm scared to death that it's going to take one person putting it on Fox News, one person in my community to say, I think this is crap, and look what I can do.
That's what's different.
And we lose, right? And I think that, so I think the challenge or the question that I have is how do we do this in a way when the stakes feel so high? Like, how does that trans student sit in a classroom, right? It's the James Baldwin quote, right? Like, and, you know, how does that trans student sit in a classroom with someone who says, I believe there are two genders and it's fixed? And, you know, and those are two very, very different beliefs. So how do we do that well in this moment? Again, when a student can turn around and say, well, the president's in the same way.
I wonder what I was wanting to ask you, because I don't know if there's a quick answer to that, given that you can't get, I'm sorry, given that you can't even get a passport in Texas now.
Right.
Right. So, but I'm curious about, because we're educators and our job is to educate, not necessarily advocate, but this question you raised about discourse and dialogue, and we were talking about civics, and I'm curious, could we imagine students, almost like Socrates, like really every student learning a way to dialogue and learn discourse, right? Because we don't do that now. We absolutely don't. And there's no courses in that. I loved your Civics 101. And I'm wondering if there is that kind of creative thinking, and then that would get an answer to Chris's question, right? If we all were trained in a way of doing discourse. I don't know what it is, but Socrates, I think, did.
Yeah, I think that, you know, from what I understand about this learning context is that, you know, it's special, you know, it's quite unique from probably even the school that it shares on the wall with, right? It's grappling with different challenges and different stressors than you know, I would say more traditional comprehensive high school. But you know, I think like there's so many different ideas that I have, and none of them are very clear because I'm still in shock and in pain, like many of you all are too. But I do think the first thing is we do need to address it. You know, don't try to pretend like this isn't happening. Don't try to rush it over the, you know. We need to learn from our past. And we did that with COVID-19 and Freedom Summit in 2020. A lot of kids ended up hurt. You know, I was working with kids during that time, and they were just like, yo, my principal, my teachers, no one said anything about Breonna Taylor, no one said anything about Ahmaud Arbery, no one said anything about George Floyd, no one said anything about the riots and the looting, all that's happening in my neighborhood, where I live, right? So, not in where, like, the teachers live, not in the suburbs. You know, so I think that we have to learn from that, because what that did was that showed a lot of kids that they don't matter. I go back to the mattering thing quite a bit. The other thing is that affinity groups are really helpful. We don't, you know, like creating spaces, yeah, for kids to come together within affinity by, you know, race, ethnicity, language, gender identity, whatever, to come and process something in a, I don't want to use the term safe space, that's a little hackneyed, but a term like, it's like a sanctuary, a place that's a little bit more protected and cordoned off for people to have similar experiences to process it. I think that's really important.
Do you see that ability to have that affinity group, that ability to go to a safe space? And I think that term, I know it's overused, but I think it actually still matters. Is one of the goals of that, to then be able to say to the students, to the people in that affinity group, you know we're here for you.
Yeah.
So that means you now can go back into our larger community where there's not as much safety, or there's not as much unanimity of thought or unanimity of experience. And now, if you know we're here, that gives you the strength, that gives you the space, that gives you the freedom to have the harder conversation, knowing that we'll be here when that conversation's done, and thus create community with those who disagree because there's a community behind you that gives you that ability. I have no idea if that just made sense.
That might be a tall order.
Well, because I think that if you don't, because if we're going to have the dialogue in the diverse room, and we're going to say to students, like, yes, we have to, like, people disagree with you within these walls. So here's a space where fewer people disagree with you. If by doing that, do we hope that then gives them the ability to stay when someone says something that feels like an identity threat? Well, I've got my people behind me, so I'm willing to engage with you now.
Yeah, I think affinity, my training as a development psychologist, is that affinity groups should be a space where people define for themselves.
Okay.
Okay, so for some people it may be exactly what you said. For other people, it just may be a place where they feel they belong, just like you have a supportive, family. I think that there are two people in this audience, at least, who have been students of mine, and of course it focuses on culture and race, and it is addressed in every time I teach it. It's different, but there are some things that guide me in doing it. There's some core values about issues of equity and justice, and even now, I tell students, you might have a tape recorder, I don't know.
Right.
But I am not afraid to sit here and tell you what I think. We're not going to belabor the current, administration necessarily, but there are some big issues that may be offensive and have been offensive to students in that class. And how do you voice it? How do you make that known? And I just think that if it's in a classroom, you really have to be very attentive to what you're hearing. When I walk in that class, first day and throughout the semester, I am watching people's body language. I am watching, whether just like I'm doing today, whether people are, tuning out, what they're paying attention to. I can tell you who's going to write me a really bad evaluation, and I don't really kind of care, because I give you options during the semester. If you don't tell me during the semester, oops. But I do think it's that kind of careful attention and vigilance and a particular commitment to what is the learning stance, what is the inquiry, reminding people that that's what knowledge is. You know, it's really around the inquiry that you want to engage in. And they may leave angry, but will they leave will they leave thinking that they have been given a fair chance to express their opinions, even if they feel, you know, that some people were intolerant? I think tolerance, I am intolerant of hate.
Right.
And I'm not gonna let that happen in a classroom. And I put my positionality up front in the class. The first day I say exactly who I am and what they will hear during the course of the semester. And so I think trying to create a space where people do that and knowing that it's not always going to be perfect.
So I can ask questions all night long, but we've got, 20 or so minutes left, and I wanted to be able to open this up. What questions do you have for folks? And so, I am going to come back to I'm going to hold the last 5 minutes because I have a closing question I have that I do want you all to answer. But what questions do you have for our panelists? Yeah.
I mean, I'm just thinking this from what was just said. I guess, I think it was an older idea that you try to not say what you think politically, or you try to appear neutral to students. I feel like that's changing. I guess I'm asking the question, is it okay to take a side in front of students, do you think, and let them know? I don't know, it could be alienating to some, but it's also I feel like we're not good at hiding it even when we pretend to stay neutral. So, I don't know what you think about that.
Well, in that positionality, I'm not unclear. I mean, I don't say anything it's certainly offensive. I say I come with a very, what people would describe as a progressive attitude. I believe in social justice. I grew up in a family that was highly committed to civil rights. I tell them who that person is, and yet I want to hear what you're thinking. It doesn't stop me from hearing what you're thinking, and my kind of bottom line is you can think whatever you'd like as long as it's based on some data and some evidence, and you can't just say things. Facts still matter to me. It isn't. When you take, there was a student actually was telling me the other day that she laughed, and she did this in her class, because sometimes folks would say things and it sounded really great, and I would say, and your evidence is? And it doesn't have to be concrete, doesn't have to be results from any data set. It's whether somebody else said it, whether it's you read it somewhere, and distinguishing what you think from what exists in the knowledge base, and being able to represent those two, those two things. I just have to, I kind of want to do a quick commercial.
Yeah.
So, because people can have access to this. I said before that I'm a tri-chair of the Faculty Senate. We have a series of roundtables on the future of higher education where some of these issues are being addressed. So I want to invite you.
I'm assuming you're a public school teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think that is the dilemma of public school teachers. In preparation to come here, I talked to a lot of teachers about your question, and sort of the general sense from them was, we're here to teach about whatever the issue is and not advocate. And that's hard sometimes, particularly for young teachers, right? But I think if we can think about ourselves as educators, not advocates, that helps. That does help. So you came at it from, we used to be told, this thing, and now you're wondering, and I would suggest, let's reaffirm that we're educators, not advocates. But I so appreciated the way you're been talking about it, and I wanted to offer another way that I think, I just did this yesterday in class. Now granted, these are graduate students, so you'll have to take this and think about how to reframe it for 12th graders, but I'd be curious, I'd love to hear what you get if you like this idea. So it's the first class, and I want to make sure, because it's a very diverse group, very international as well. And so I ask everyone to work in pairs first, and I ask them, what do you want others to know about your race, religion, ethnicity, linguistic background, gender, et cetera, just as pairs. And then what assumptions don't you want people to make about you? And so, you know, the whole group works on those two questions, and then we come into a big circle, and it's open space for anybody. And like Vivian's saying, I'm watching to see, you know, who's got their arms crossed and thinking that was the worst activity that we just did, because they're there, and who will speak. And I was, because still it's the first class, and one student, I was so pleased. She sort of said, if anyone asks me about these questions anymore on this campus, I'm gonna, you know. So it was clear, you know, where she stood. But I think if we can do more like that, and again, I don't know what the prompt would be for 12th graders, but I'd love to hear what you might use.
I would just say, just very quickly, that I actually feel your pain. And I had several younger students in my class this past semester, first and second year teachers in particular. And I know, one said, I don't know how to take the things that we are talking about in here back to my students without, well, that's one, and then taking it back without being reprimanded. So, you know, I would like, you know, I would like it would be great to have an opportunity to sit with teachers and think about that. You know, when I think about topics that I as a faculty member could do and Penn could do, I mean, since we're here, that's some of the things, you know, that could happen. We have my colleague Susan Lytle created the Philadelphia Writing Project, and I know people here are a part of, but talking about communities, it would be great to be able to cross these boundaries of Penn and SLA and all of the other schools to think about that in a more meaningful way. Because I don't have the answer as well. I mean, there are things I could say, but then of course I'm not my brilliant, you know, student who is just totally frustrated going back to a place that's not SLA. I mean, I'm pretty sure, but going to some place that's, you know, a little less or much less receptive to these ideas.
Yeah.
I'm reflecting a lot on the talk of communities and the smaller communities within a community and how students find kind of their people, and as a parent of two recent high school graduates, that's something I've watched kids do. But both at the college or how do we make sure kids aren't slipping through the cracks? How do we kind of follow kids to know? I mean, SLA has systems in place. Doesn't mean kids don't fall through the cracks still, but you have very deliberate things put in place to ensure that kids are being cared for and known. But most high schools, most colleges are much larger, are much broader.
Right.
And how, what are ways for us to do that?
To take my moderator hat up, I think to look at the work, for example, that Sean Harper did when he was at Penn, looking at he found that if a student had a mentor, their chances of dropping out of college decreased by an order of magnitude. I forget the exact data. It did not matter, and the data held if it was, because at first everybody thought, like, well, we have to match up, you know, African American students, like, does it have to be an affinity mentor? And it turns out it didn't. It turns out a mentor, like someone who says, I am here for you. And, you know, for SLA that's advisory, for BAA that was advisory, for the Progressive Schools movement right? That is, so like the funny thing is that on this particular one, we actually know the answer, which is students need mentors. And that's true at the high school level, and that I think sadly is but still very, very true at the college level, and we don't see colleges doing it. So I think this one we actually know the answer to, right? Which is advisors. And not just academic advisors that you drop in on that once a semester goes, take this class or you won't graduate, but genuinely creating that space, providing I mean, that's a financial resource that a college has to commit to, that high schools have to commit to in the schedule, but it works, and it works incredibly, and all of the research tells us that. I don't know if anybody else wants to.
Just the mentors don't have to be professors or professional staff members, right? You can have near-peer mentors. There can be student organizations, obviously activities, groups like that. It is scary, right? There are a lot. I mean, at Drexel, we have 12, 13,000 undergraduates. There's a lot of them, there are lots of layers in place to help catch students if things are not going well. But you're right. There's nothing that's totally foolproof. Right? I am going to. Well, again, I'll tell you that the official answer is yes. We have robust systems of residential assistance, right? You're paired with a dormitory group initially, right? And then there's orientation about looking out for each other, all those things. Of course, there's academic layers, academic advising. We have something called the ARC, the Academic Resource Center, which is another thing, and they track students. So there are all these levels. Oh, and then of course Drexel, like almost every other college and university, has greatly expanded mental health support, mental health resources. Right? So there are all those layers there. Now I'm going to put my parent hat on. And as a parent, the thing that I would be looking out for the most is my child engaged in something, right? Or are they just, okay, you went to class, did you do anything else? Is it just class and back to the dorm, or class and the thing? Are you engaged in something? Is it a group? Are you playing Frisbee on the lawn? Are you, going out to movies, with your friends on Friday nights or whatever, right? Are you engaged in something, right? Because otherwise, then it does get to be that, again, this isn't an absolute indicator, but if a student starts to withdraw and just, not engage with other students, not engage in activities, it could be they just really like playing Fortnite, right? and that's my son, who would probably be in that category. It could be just that, but that's what I would be looking out for. And my son's in 11th grade now, so I have to, not quite yet, but I will.
Dan, I'm going to give you the last question, and I'm going to pick up the classic one-word wrap.
He's got one more question. It's not really-
Yeah, so it's the second.
Good. I've got a question, but before, I just wanted to say something that I've used to deal with the, what's your political stance? That seems to work for me in rural Maine, where, I don't know if you know, but not exactly the most progressive place in the country. Darn it, we try. As purple as it gets, yeah. But something that's worked for me is when kids ask me, they'll ask me every time. And I work with middle school, high school, and elementary school kids. And they will ask me, so who are you going to vote for? And I'll tell them, you know who I'm going to vote for.
That's nice. That's nice.
I'll say, you know me, you know the values in this room, you know what pisses me off, you know what makes me smile, it makes me happy. You tell me who I'm going to vote for. And they're like, if we guess it, will you tell us? I'm like, no. Because you already know.
That's nice.
Right?
That's nice.
And it's always interesting, the kid wearing the
That's
45,
nice.
47 hat asks.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no. And then there's just this little like, huh. And,
Yeah.
but that allows for this like opening of dialogue too. And because you get to be your whole self, right? But it's also the importance of being your whole self all the time. Back when Twitter wasn't a hellscape, I got into it really good. About certain topics. So. But my question that I wanted to ask was, you all work with higher ed kids. I use kids in a big broad term, right? Undergrad, grad. What is a skill set, a posture, posture, a mindset that you would love to see more learners landing in higher ed with? And I don't mean the one, right? It doesn't have to be like, if we could do one thing better. But what's something that you just, from your experience, would just bring joy to you? Be like, oh, thank Grady, today,
I know what it is.
this brand new person
That's a great question.
in my
I know what it is.
world.
Yeah.
That was my question.
I always say it's got to, because we do it in high school, I don't remember the acronym, but, take 3, ask 3 people before you ask the teacher. So, because I got one that's driving me nuts now. I've already emailed him like 6 times, and it's like, right, you're saying, like that kind of kid. So I actually emailed him back, I said, remember you talked about yesterday? You got to ask 3 of your peers before you ask me. And so she sent back a really sweet email, she goes, I forgot, thank you so much. So that, because I don't think we work on that skill in high school and middle school. So that'd be my favorite.
No, that's a really good one. I'll tell you my experience from teaching, a lot of first-year engineering students, right? Students, I would love to see more students have some experience with a project, of conceiving a project, doing it, implementing it, and finishing it off. Like taking it all the way through, right? Everybody has done a piece of it. I said, oh, I know how to do that part. Right? But there's always, well, not always, almost always some sort of gap there.
I like that answer. And it's one of the things that we have to keep reminding folks that we want students to feel a sense of completion on something, that I have this. But I really value their curiosity and have them thinking about how they want that curiosity to unfold.
Yeah, I kept jotting things down, crossing them off as my colleagues have already said them. I'll tell you, my 3, I guess, that I'm left with are perseverance, which kind of touches on what's been said here. The next one is follow-up. I get a lot of emails from students, and then they just kind of they drift away. Like they were passionate about something, and they just kind of don't follow up on things. Or, I mean, I'm sure Dr. Gass, you all are in the same situation, right? Hundreds of letters of recommendation for folks, and then you never hear from them again. Like, did you ever get into that school? Or one of the 15 that I wrote for before? I'm a human. I care about you, and I think about you from time to time. What she's up to now? I think the last thing is, and this might seem superficial, but it actually kind of matters, is, and I don't know if this is one of these 2 words, it's either poise or confidence. I get a lot of students who stand up in front of a class of 30 others and just present wearing slippers and a hoodie and some jogging pants. I'm just like, it makes me feel like you don't care sometimes. So it's not, and I'm not saying you have to put on a suit, I'm not saying, but I'm just like, it says something if you present with the same type of, at least, passion that you feel in your brain about something. I'll just say that. Yeah.
Reminds me of the old Taylor Mali poem, right? That ends with, "It's not enough to question authority; you got to speak with it."
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Talk clearly.
I can't think of a better way. I had sort of one of those whip around questions, but Dan, I think yours was better. So with that, I would like everybody, if we could thank our panelists for. Just like I am as soon as I turn my mic off. And we will see everybody back here for the welcoming address at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. So have a great evening, everybody, and welcome to Educon.